That's just a stupid backup.
It's not just a backup. It's QB2. QB2 hoo.
Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Go to Bowl fam, it's the director. Chargers fans, I get it, man. We're all hoping for the dub on Saturday. Preseason games are what they are, though, man. I think what's more important than grabbing a dub in this week's game was figuring out where the team is at, where they can improve, and where some of their strengths lie that they can continue building upon. Now, I'm here to tell you guys right now, we did see some great stuff in this game, which we're going to highlight in our post-game report. But yeah, there are obviously some things that the team needs to work on. I'm sure Jim Harbaugh mentioned a lot of them in his post-press conference there as well. We're going to go over a lot of those things too and give you guys a chance to chime in the comment section of how you think the team's doing and what you think the team needs to do in order to improve in week 2 versus the Rams coming up this weekend. I'm just going to say this right now, man. Quarterback's going to be taken a look at. I'm very sure that Chargers fans are very well aware and have opinions on who should be getting some more snaps. Perez! Next week in week 2 of preseason. Before we do kick things off, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $250. Newcomers, take advantage of the offer on screen. As well as, guys, remember, there are special offers right now. If you just log in, throw down your first slate down here, you can pick one of these. It's just boosted odds, and you can also get started on the Chargers season with our first game versus the Raiders. Before we do kick off, hit us up with the like and sub. If you do enjoy this Chargers content, the short amount of time you guys take the like, sub, bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it, baby. Lights, camera, action.
Who's got it better than us?
Your Chargers versus Seahawks post-game reports. We got some things to go over. Before we do that, though, man, a couple of things of news I wanted to go over, right? We got a couple of new Chargers added to the roster. First one being free agent linebacker Shaquille Quarterman joining the Chargers from the Eagles, who released him on Sunday. Chargers are looking to load up on the position, as that wasn't the only signing we had this morning. Of course, the Chargers would also sign standout UFL linebacker, what was his name again out here? Frank Ginda. Of course, we're not huge UFL diehard fans, but you know what? It is a name worth noting because, as stated here in the tweet, he was a Defensive Player of the Year player in that league, and it seems like it's an angle that the Chargers are trying to take more advantage of this season. We got Luis Perez, who's going to be one of the best players in that league the last couple of seasons, won MVP with the XFL 2 seasons ago, and then now we got we've got Frank Ginda, who was the Defensive Player of the Year last year in that league as well. So, I mean, the best of that league could end up being something in the NFL for the Chargers. Good to see them making moves out here to better improve the team before kickoff in September. Of course, to make room for these players, the Chargers did release a couple of Chargers in Casey Bauman. I did know that one of the quarterbacks was going to end up being released. Casey Bauman probably going to be the most likely there. And then Praise Olatoke, the speedy wide receiver from the international program, also being released. That one is a little bit surprising, but you know, the Chargers wide receiver room is going to see a lot more competition as the weeks go on, and likely going to be using that spot for Okoye, I do believe, down the road. So let's get into some of my thoughts of this game. Of course, it's not going to be one Chargers fans were expecting. It's not going to be one that made us jump out of our seats with joy. This is just going to kind of be the new Jim Harbaugh way, right? Not going to be showing a lot of things up front. Many of his, systems and plays and techniques are going to be held close to the vest, and because of that, I don't think we're going to see a whole lot in terms of production in preseason. However, a big thing to note in preseason games, whether or not there's great plays being called or whatever, is the individual players, the talent there, the effort there, and honestly, the odds of making the roster with these individual players. And the first one that we are definitely going to be going over is quarterback Easton Stick, who's been with the team a while now, right? Drafted back in the days of Phillip Rivers. A lot of us excited to think about what his mobility could do in terms of depth And for the longest time, he's been an okay backup, right? And I would say there are times where he was pretty good. I wouldn't go as far as great, but pretty good. Now at this point where the Chargers and its fans has seen a pretty good sample size of what he could be in the league. Of course, also adding on the several games he got to start last season with Justin Herbert sidelined. I'm starting to believe that we've got a good enough sample size to really challenge that spot at QB2 because Easton Stick has been, for lack of a better term, uninspiring these past couple of seasons. And in particular, this first preseason game was pretty eye-opening. Unfortunately for Easton Stick, it feels like the wheels did fall off, and it was a pretty bad outing from him. He fell pretty flat. 5 for 13, 31 yards, an interception. He did rush for a few yards here and there too, but for the most part, it was a pretty bad outing by him. Not just in terms of production, but some of the decision making. I know early there was a pass by Easton Stick trying to lead Hayden Hurst open, but he led him right into traffic, which resulted in a pretty nasty hit by our new tight end Hayden Hurst, who ended up hobbling off the field. Hopefully he is okay, but that, of course, is something you don't like seeing from the quarterback play. And Harbaugh doesn't feel like there's enough juice in the quarterback room anyway. He did talk about there not being enough challenge out there for Easton Stick. He challenged the backups in Perez and Max Dugen to really step up. And right now it feels like that narrative is going to be put into the foreground in these next couple of weeks. Jim Harbaugh refused to mention or commit to who the quarterback's going to be at the in quarter 1 and week 2 versus the Rams. And it's probably for good reason. He wants to see what happens in practice, and maybe the Chargers aren't done making additional signings. I know there's been talk about maybe we get Ryan Tannehill out here. However unlikely, there's been, speculation about Colin Kaepernick. All of that aside, I think the Chargers have room or need to make room for improvement at the quarterback position right now, because it's definitely a concern and maybe the biggest point of emphasis from Chargers fans after the Week 1 preseason game versus the Seahawks. Very poor outing by Easton Stick. However, I will say there were some bright spots out here, right? Outside, as soon as Easton Stick exited, and we saw in the second half Max Dugen take the field, I do think the offense started to breathe a little bit of life. I'm not going to say it improved dramatically. I'm not going to say, Max Dugen was the answer here, but it was better. And it was pretty obvious that the changing quarterback did improve the Chargers offense, even by a small margin. And we did see a bit of flash from Max Dugen. We saw a couple of nice passes, good zip on the ball, and I would say a different style of running, right? Of course, also a mobile quarterback out of TCU. Max Dugen has his way with scrambling for yards that works for him in a bigger body kind of style, right? I think a lot of us, when I think of Easton Stick running the ball, it kind of feels like, a DB out there, maybe a little wide receiver in terms of his technique and his size. Max Dugen feels more like a tight end, right? A little bit more physicality to him. He did show it a little bit in his play, and it's something I think fits the team narrative just a little bit better from the backup quarterback perspective, but definitely not, in my opinion, the long-term answer at quarterback, to at least yet. Maybe he does flash even more in weeks 2 and 3, and we find a little bit more from him. But I think the big narrative that everybody came here to watch was regarding the Chargers' UFL standout signing in Luis Perez. This dude, I don't know what I was expecting, right? I just wanted to see a little bit of flash from him. Of course, a lot of us excited about his style. Has a little bit of Phillip Rivers to his style, right? Kind of a pocket passer sort of dude with a big arm. And he stepped out there late in the fourth quarter and really showed us why he was the best of the best in the XFL a couple of years ago and one of the best in the UFL last year. I don't know, man. The first pass we saw, right? We saw Easton Stick go for 31 yards on 13 attempts in the whole first quarter, or the first half. I think the very first play by Luis Perez broke that, right? I think he went for over 30 yards, big play downfield, and the biggest thing I think all of us were extremely impressed by was his ball placement. There was only a small margin of error, right, when you're trying to pass that, that high point pass or whatever it is, that he was just trying to drop it in the bucket for our guy on the sideline. And he did just that. Just not even once, but like 3 times in a row. Sure, only a couple of completions because he was put in a really tough spot late in the fourth, trying to make something happen out of nothing. But his ball placement, his arm, his navigation of the pocket, it it was pretty impressive. And if I were the Chargers at this point, I'm 100% giving Perez at least one half, if not a full quarter, right, of reps in this next week versus the Rams. I want to see what's going on with Luis Perez, who, again, he's 29 years old. Definitely not the standard archetype that you're going to see from backup quarterback, but if he's got it, man, he's got it. And out of all the quarterbacks last week, I would say Luis Perez inspired the most confidence and excitement from the Chargers fans very late in the fourth quarter. I want to see more of him. Let's see what this guy's got, man. Now, outside of the quarterbacks, one big win, one big dub from this week that I think should never go unnoticed, right? I do think that when you see the score and you're like, oh, man, the Chargers lost, whatever, it's easy to forget what the Bolts accomplished. And the biggest accomplishment of the week absolutely was their defense. My, oh my, did Jesse Minter put on a show this week. They went bananas. And of course, we're not really running the full playbook right now, all right? He's coming out there pretty vanilla, not wanting to show his cards too early. Despite that, he did show us and elevate the individual talent of his players, including guys like Tony Jefferson, who ended up making some plays out there. The DBs looked pretty dang good, but ultimately, I would say the Jesse Minter defense, and the biggest thing that's got me excited about his style and his system, that shined through. And that was the pressure. Not just from the edge position, which we'll get to, but also the DBs, very exotic blitz packages. It felt very much so like a good preview of what we're going to see later in the year. And again, it was just the base version, the vanilla version, level 1, right? Just wait till we crank that thing up to 11 in week 1 versus the Raiders. I got to say, man, which is very shocking to me at this point, the Chargers defense looks very good. I was expecting them to be, above average, maybe even around average would have been a dramatic, improvement from last year in Brandon Staley. But this season, man, already in practice and in preseason, it feels like there has been a pretty big movement of the needle in terms of improvement for the Chargers defense. And it's been great, man. I can't wait to see more of that unfold. Now, one of the players, I would say maybe one of the biggest players that benefited from his play calling this week and his individual effort is going to be Nick Niemann, which he was a guy that I listed in my pregame shows. Like, yeah, I do expect him to have a pretty good day. He's a standout special team guy that is certainly a pretty good backup at inside linebacker. But, man, did he go bananas this game, too, dude. Nick Niemann, 12 tackles. He logged himself a sack, couple quarterback hits. He was everywhere. And this is exactly the kind of guy you want on special teams, right? The dude that stands out in terms of his play there, but also in a pinch if he needs to come out and play, a little inside linebacker, he's got the chops to make it happen. And I think at one point he was listed as player of the game, which is pretty insane to me. I mean, those 12 tackles, very impressive. He was all over the Sam Howell offense, and PJ Walker, I think, at one point, too. Nick Niemann is the man, dude, and he's going to be a highly coveted special teams player for the Chargers for the next couple of seasons. Hopefully we get to retain him past that, but very much so need to give our flowers to Nick Niemann, who had a heck of a game this week. But you know what? Another big part of the defense, which I said we were going to get a background to, we're going to do that right now, is the edge position. The edge position went ballistic, and this is the biggest point of emphasis that we've been looking for in anticipating a Jesse Minter defense, right? We need to see that edge position pop because a lot is riding on that position. Everything is counting on that pressure. DBs, less time in coverage, more opportunities for turnovers. Interior linemen, more opportunities for sheds, more opportunities for pressure. Linebackers, more opportunities for pressure, more opportunities in coverage. Everybody's going to be elevated when those edge position guys are playing their best football. And this week, dude, despite not having Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, this team shined at that position. I mean, of course we did. We're so deep that we saw Tuli Tuipulotu out there a good number of plays, and he went off as well, man. This is one big thing that gets me excited about this whole idea, is that it's not just Bud Dupree who was out there. I think he had a couple of nice plays. Tuli Tuipulotu, who was insane, right? He was great. He was all over Sam Howell. He looked sharp as ever. He was even out there in coverage a little bit, which is something that we saw even in the Brandon Staley days. Tuli was great. But even these guys below them, right? There's a rising star that we haven't mentioned much about in my videos, at least. And it's going to be this guy right here, number 57, who shouldn't go unnoticed anymore, right? Tremont Morris Brash. This dude really took over. I think he actually even went out there and started with Thule right away. You can see them together in this photo, obviously. This guy might be one of those, gems or rising stars in the offseason and training camp or in practice and now in the preseason. It feels like he could end up making the roster pretty easily. He had an awesome outing out there. He had a pass defended, which was really impressive. It really helped us out in that drive. He provided plenty of pressure. He looked awesome out there. And that just tells you how deep this position is for the Chargers and just how much potential we have to maybe even roster 5 or 6 edge rushers on this team. At this point, why not? You know what I mean? Like, if it's such a big point of emphasis for the defense and its identity, let's make sure these guys are staying on the squad. I certainly think Brash is going to make the team now, especially with the news, unfortunately, that we heard that Chris Rumpf was sidelined with an injury from this last game, and it sounds like he's going to be out a while. With that information, I feel like Brash is sort of an auto add after this week, and he's going to add depth that I think honestly is really good for this team. If something were to happen, knock on wood, to any of the starters or any of the big four, we still have guys with really nice upside behind them on the depth chart. So very nice outing by the edge players. These guys definitely are going to be a big impact on the Chargers' identity on defense going forward. Another big shocker I had this week, which again, another one that I wasn't quite expecting. Corners looked good. And this is something that I already alluded to in my in my video going over the joint practice with the Rams. I was like, man, the corners actually showed out, man. They looked real nice out there. And it happened again in preseason, so it's starting to look like a trend, a trait, right? It feels like it's not anything happening by accident. The Chargers actually have something going on at corner. Now, the first quarter, we had Asante Samuel out there, and then, of course, Christian Fulton, who's really started to surprise me. I didn't have as much faith in Christian Fulton as I'm sure Christian Fulton had in himself, man. I was like, it's kind of an experiment. We'll see what happens. But he's done nothing but been pretty great, pretty solid, since that joint practice, maybe even in training camp. He's looked great. He's looked awesome. And then even past that, man, Dean Leonard looked real nice on the outside. He surprisingly kept up with players like just JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba. He looked really good in coverage at times, even though he did drop a pick. The Chargers, if you got to give them one criticism this week, the DVs dropped like 2 or 3 interceptions, so that jugs machine's going to be on overdrive this week at practice. But you know what? Tariq, still, a few other guys, these dudes really did stand out. The corners, the DVs, everybody looked really, really good, dude. And if that instills some confidence in me that the position group's going to be fine this season, please, the more the better, because it's definitely a position that made me a little bit nervous before going into kickoff. So here we go, man. Christian Fulton might be that bounce back player that we hoped he would be, and the depth is actually looking quite nice, especially when you got the edge rushers providing a little bit more help for them out there. So anyway, there we go. Next up, we got ourselves a nice outing here by, dude, this is a big part of the Jesse Minter defense that I'm so excited about. Send the nickel, baby. Whether it be a safety or corner, Jesse Minter is sending the heat, man. Those blitz packages are absolutely insane, and it looks awesome to see that unfold even in a preseason game and see a lot of success there. We often saw a defensive back free, a linebacker free. Early on, I think we saw Alohi Gilman and Jasir Taylor blitzing from the nickel and from the safety position. Like, that was awesome, dude. That was great to see because it was actually working. It freed up other dudes like linebackers as well. Later, we saw Tariq Still. We saw Harper out there who ended up getting a sack too. Again, I think a lot of that actually attributed to the pair of inside linebacker sacks that we got, right? I feel like this whole idea of the edge players and then throwing in these guys that play really well in terms of blitzing from the nickel, like Derwin James, Alohi, Still, and Jasir, it's going to be a pretty big headache for offensive coordinators to account for when there's that much heat coming at you and quality players at the edge, quality players in nickel, and at corner. It feels like something. It feels like something that's going to be real fun to watch this year. And we could end up being one of the most dangerous pass rushing teams in the league, thanks to Minter, his defense, and the talent that we have at these various positions, man. It's awesome. Another position group that definitely got elevated was the interior line. We saw some nice moves by Morgan Fox, but the big one I want to mention was Tito Ogbonia, man. This guy, hello, Tito. This dude looked awesome. Disruptive. Constant shedding, resulting in pressure. Dude was in the face of Hal and I think PJ Walker. Maybe I don't know if he played that late, but I do remember him being a pretty big force, especially when the edge players were playing up. It feels like that's going to be a really nice piece to the interior, and these guys are showing up in those opportunities. Tito looked great. We needed a defensive lineman to step up big time, right? I think we saw a couple of nice things from Matlock, but for the most part, we need to see individual talent step up. And Tito, to me, at least from the interior, looked like the guy this week. He was awesome. And if he can continue to progress, he can become that guy that a lot of us were hoping to see a few years ago when he was drafted. He really has been hindered by injuries. If he can stay on the field, he could end up being a pretty pivotal piece to this defensive line, which desperately needed help versus the run this year. And props to Tito, who definitely helped himself out in terms of pass rushing as well. Now, moving to the offense a little bit. The defense definitely was the highlight of the game for Chargers fans. The offense, though, we need to see some more. We need to see some more desperately, because right now there wasn't much hope for Chargers fans that this new idea is going to translate. Let's start off with this topic. Roman off to a kind of a duddy start, a bad start, right? I feel like Greg Roman had an idea of what he wanted to build here. He brought in the pieces to try and make it happen, and it all really fell flat this week, right? Where's the strength of this offense? Where's the identity that was kind of, told to us along the entire offseason? I didn't see any good running out there. I saw bad blocking from the offensive line. It's a pretty uninspiring start to the new look on offense, and it's something that really does need to have a little bit more of a microscope on it, because we have to figure out what's going on, and if there's hope that the Chargers can survive even without Justin Herbert, because right now we're hoping to build something to help Justin Herbert, and it feels like without Justin Herbert, none of it is syncing up and none of it's working correctly. Sure, the quarterbacks did not help, but they did look lost out there. There was no hope, no help on the ground either. So it just felt like the ideas and the concepts that this was built on just did not unfold the way that we were hoping. And probably the biggest and most concerning part of it, like the guy that you're seeing on screen right now, the offensive line looked bad. Alex Leatherwood, which we were a lot of us hoping to see have some form of a bounce back under Jim Harbaugh, he did not look good this week. He looked pretty bad. I don't know how many pressures or whatever he was responsible for, but it must have been a good amount. Brendan Hymas did not look good, backup center. There was a point where he really blew it on a couple of run blocking assignments. Foster Sorrell looked pretty bad. Opposite, I think it was Alex Leatherwood in many instances. Just did not look good in terms of depth. And depth is a big part of this team's identity on offensive line, right? This offensive line needs to be looked at as a weapon. And right now, the backups, we were hoping to see a little bit more, and they really did not show up on Sunday. So it felt a little bit like a rude awakening. It really did. Hopefully guys like Barnhart and Bucky Williams start to step up at some point. But right now, the depth doesn't look great. The execution doesn't look great. And the overall offensive play calling didn't inspire for a lot. But you know what? There is a little bit of hope out here, a little bit of good. If one thing happened right this week, it was the Chargers' first-round pick actually inspiring some hope. This is coming in from Tyler Schoen of Guilty as Charged. Definitely check them out. He had a couple of nice plays that he caught out here of our guy Joe Alt, really out there making a difference in terms of space. Look at this dude, man. Like he mentioned here, he should not be moving that quick. Alt is definitely going to be an impact player this season. Everybody's sort of looking for hope there and looking for highlights because of how much the other first rounders are looking good, and not just in preseason but in camp. Well, here's some for us Chargers fans, man. Here's another play that he posted down here. Joe Alt there on the right side. Look at that speed. Look at that space. Like, he definitely keeps up with the best of them. And with the kind of power and size that he's bringing to the position, it's definitely going to be something that helps contribute to the Chargers' success on offensive line. So, to be fair, Joe Alt did look good in his first game. Sure, there was a couple of rough patches here and there, but for the most part, he was great. Extremely fast, agile for his size. He got low and created some big space for the offense. That could become a more consistent thing as his opportunities grow. Next up, big backs missed. Now, this is going to be a big part of why I think the offense maybe struggled a little bit, okay? And stay with me here. I think the Chargers offense might be unlocked a little bit more when we see a running back that carries the vision of the style of offense get more snaps, maybe even next week, right? this may have attributed to the poor day on offense, the lack of running back talent and maybe scheme fit. Because Jarrett Patterson started the day off, and he was pretty great. I'm not going to lie. He had a pretty decent day. He didn't look terrible at all. But it didn't feel like the identity archetype of running back that we're building this team for, right? We want somebody big, mean, physical. Because everyone outside of Patterson, it felt like they struggled pretty mightily. You know, mainly due to poor run blocking for sure. I'm going to say that. Of course, we just told the line they need to step up. Well, that's not going to help your running backs any. But it felt like Spiller just couldn't get anything going. It felt like even Elijah Dotson was having trouble. We didn't see any Kamani Vidal. Of course, we didn't see JK or Gus. But the lack of physicality, in my opinion, was felt, right? I think a big back like Gus, compact guy like Vidal, these guys were missed. If they had been in this game, of course, you know, Gus and JK are not going to be. Let's say Vidal. If Vidal was in this game, I feel like we have a different day on offense. Vidal, I think he was suited up at the start of the game and then suited down a little bit into the game, so he didn't see any snaps. I feel like Vidal fits this team very well in terms of what they're trying to build. And if he saw some snaps out there, maybe the run game does see a bit of improvement. Maybe the run game does get going, because that physicality was really sort of absent this week, and it's a big part of the Jim Harbaugh identity, the Greg Roman identity, and the Chargers' identity this year. We got to keep that in mind. Maybe, hopefully, next week we do see Vidal out there. I don't expect to see Gus and JK. Maybe a little bit in the last preseason game, but for the most part, I don't expect to see them at all in preseason. Hopefully next week is the week we get to see Vidal, who's one of my big players that I was hoping to see in this game anyway. You know who the other player was that I was hoping to see? Well, we got to see him, but we didn't see much of opportunity for Brendan Rice this week. Brendan Rice, who in this photo, it was during the pick, I think, by Kobe Bryant. This was something that if you blinked, you missed it. Something that's going to go overlooked a lot because he didn't log anything this week. He had 3 attempts, 0 receptions. If you were just looking at the stat sheet, you would say Rice he was a bust this week. He didn't have the week that he was hoping to have. But, you know, if I would challenge you guys to look a little bit closer, if you guys have access to replays or whatever. If you watch Brendan Rice and what he was doing out there, despite the horrid quarterback play, you would notice something pretty great. I would be remiss if I didn't mention how great Brendan Rice played. He looked open in several plays, several opportunities down there. He just never got the ball in those opportunities for whatever reason. Outside of a couple of deep shots, he really didn't get any opportunity. And those were pretty desperate attempts too, right? I mean, of course, he could have made a play on it. There was one really nice ball by Luis Perez that could have been caught, but it was, again, in traffic, tough assignment there. But aside from that, man, you'd watch his route running. There were several, I would say, slants and posts that I noticed that he was open. A couple plays on the sideline too, on those out or flag routes. Very, very cool stuff by him in terms of displaying his route running, his speed. He was pretty impressive, right? The speed is something that always catches me off guard. When I was there in person at training camp a few weeks ago, that was something that really caught me off guard. I was like, wow, Brendan Rice is actually pretty freaking fast. And the route running was pretty freaking crisp, right? He was superb in this game. You just never would know it because he didn't log any yards. I feel like if the quarterback play improves next week, if we see Perez out there, if we see a step up from Stick or whatever, if we see targets thrown in Brendan Rice's direction, I almost guarantee a standout day for him. Brendan Rice is a good receiver. Dare I say, he could end up being a great receiver. We just need to see a little bit more opportunity thrown his way, especially because he's available. We're seeing him open all the time. Speaking of great players at the position, man, we also got to give our flowers to Cameron Dicker. I could not believe that Cameron Dicker accomplished what he did on Saturday. This is, again, an appreciation post for our kicker, one of the best kickers in the league that happens to be a Charger. He boomed a 58-yard field goal like it was nothing. That thing could have easily hit from the 65-yard line. There was so much air on that thing, man. There was so much distance on that thing. I could not believe it. And that's starting to make me believe that we have something extraordinarily special in Cameron Dicker for our special teams. We had to give him his flower before closing this one out. What I expect to see next week? Well, next week, the defense I expect to continue showing me what the system is built upon in terms of we need to see pressure. We need to see, that edge position sync up with the rest of the defense to help elevate everybody else. I do expect to see more of that. But what I'm hoping to see is we need to see more offense, man. A shocking stat from this week was time of possession. It was completely skewed. The Seahawks had the ball for 40 minutes, just about. I think just under 40 minutes. The Chargers had it for 20 minutes. absolutely absurd. It feels like these guys, that's the biggest thing I was upset about this week, was that the quarterback play was so bad that everybody else didn't really get to see a good opportunity to show what they've got. The offense for 20 minutes just doesn't feel right. The O deserves more time on the field, and hopefully the Chargers have something up their sleeves to help that come to reality this upcoming week versus the Rams, because it was pretty bad. And there's guys on the roster that need the reps. They need the opportunity to prove themselves, and they're not going to get it if the quarterback play is that bad and the offense isn't syncing up. So we'll have to wait and see. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. If you like what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Luis Perez will be watching you pretty closely here this upcoming Saturday.